Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back. It's lovely to have you all with us today. Today, we're going to be interviewing Dr. Amanda Brisbois, and she will introduce herself to you. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I'm just getting over laryngitis, so my apologies, but that happens, of course, when we're physicians. So I'm a general internist and a palliative care physician and have been for around 24 years. It goes by really fast, but I've really morphed my career into something very, very different, interestingly. So I have gone into leadership. I've taken on some pretty high level roles, ACMO roles, medical director roles at a couple different institutions. But as I started taking those roles through the pandemic, I was the medical director of a big hospital here in Edmonton, Alberta, and the conflict was so rampant. I felt that I wasn't very good at doing things. And so I actually got more training in conflict management and became a mediator through that. So now I'm a formal mediator. I also do coaching. I have certification in team coaching, executive coaching, and healthcare coaching. And so I do a lot of work with practitioners and teams, trying to support them through the things that we face in our careers, really trying to make being a physician an awesome thing again. I've heard lots of people kind of down about being a physician. I'm trying to empower people and give them a lot of practical tools that we can use day to day so that what we do, we love, and we morph our careers into something we love instead of sitting somewhere where we just aren't happy. And I've done that for myself. And I was just saying that to someone yesterday, one of the people I was working with, they're like, oh, I hope I can get to where you're at, where I'm proud of myself for stepping back or doing something different instead of just drive, as we're taught to do with medicine. So hopefully something I say resonates with somebody out there, and you can also find what you love to do in your career.
Love it. So good. So good. So tell us about your journey into internal medicine and palliative care. How did that come about?
Well, I wanted to be a neurologist, interestingly. So I have multiple sclerosis. I have a master's in biology. So I was always a kind of tree hugger biologist person. And I went to a conference one day and saw a poster on teaching in medicine. I was like, oh, I've got to be a doctor. I didn't know what doctors did. I applied because it was tough to get in. I always, high achiever. And I got in. I did not know what I was getting into at all. I had no idea what a doctor did. I didn't know there were different kinds of doctors. Like, it makes me laugh now. I think, oh my gosh, I just knew nothing. And then I actually did neuro in the US for a while. I have multiple sclerosis. My mom has multiple sclerosis. And so I was trying to help that population. And I found I didn't like it. And the only way I could get back into Canada was general medicine. And then I had some opportunities to go into neuro again, and I didn't do it, and tried some oncology. I've tried a whole bunch of different things. I'm not sure being a physician was the right career choice for me because I love people. I love the people piece, and it's interesting. So I morphed into palliative medicine for chronic illness care. I felt there was something missing in how we interacted with our patients. And that's actually when I first got into coaching. I wanted to learn to talk to the patients differently, really understand how they lived with their disease. And of course, it really related to me and how I lived with my own illness. And so I first did wellness coaching for that, got into chronic illness care, which is my specialty with respect to palliative medicine, internal medicine. And then I got into leadership because I saw gaps in the system. But that's my kind of GIM and palliative medicine story. And now I still do clinical about one day a week, focusing on the palliative care piece. And I love seeing patients. So I do love that piece, talking to people. But I always say to people, find a piece you love.
Love it. Okay, so What took you to the US? So why did you end up there for neurology?
It was the best program. And I
Okay.
was always kind of, a lot of us in medicine are a little try to drive for the best. So I went to the Mayo Clinic. It was the best program. I got in and I went. I thought I was American. So it did help that I was American. I was born in the US. I grew up in Calgary, so my whole life Canadian. I'm not American anymore, but that was easy for me to go down. And I
Okay.
wanted a new experience. And
Mhm.
it was very interesting. It was tough. It was tough tough go down there. It's very hard without a lot of supports, etc. But that's what drove me to go down there. It was interesting.
Okay. Interesting. So I guess it had come out of some personal experience with your MS and then that kind of interest in the neurology part of it. I can understand why that happened. Then going into a completely different health system, like you said, less support. How did you cope with manage that kind of transition?
Probably not well, if you want to go into one. I had a partner at the time that was back in Canada. So that
Okay.
made it kind of tough. I left that relationship, didn't leave it, but it was a long distance relationship, which is part of why I came back. But, I had a dog. I did things that I enjoyed doing, walking the dog, still the things that give my brain mental health reprieve. So I just tried to focus on learning. And I do a lot of support for residents now. And they always tell me, oh, I just put my head down, I do my work and I get through it. And my message is always, no, no, like create something great. But I did the same thing they were doing. And so he said, how did you cope? I put my head down, I got through it, tried to do a few things that I loved in between.
Mhm.
I always had to work very, very hard to be a physician. I'm not
Mhm.
somebody that was like, oh, school's super easy. I'm going to get 100% on all my tests. I had to really work hard. And so I went down there and they drove you hard. You didn't get any days off. Like it was a tiny amount of days off a year. It was like 5 days off a year or something then. So I just drove myself kind of into the ground thinking that was the way it was. And that's how I got through it. But I don't think I was healthy. Like if I look back on it, I think, oh, it would have been nice to see, but I don't think I could have, stepped out of the mold and say, oh, hey, I don't want to work these hours. I'm going to go to the gym at lunch. They didn't really accept that kind of thing at the time, but I'm sure it's different now because we're in a whole different world of understanding wellness and things really have started to change, which is good.
It is good. I'm not sure I can talk for it being better. Yeah, we'll have to ask people who are doing it. But it's interesting that experience is a common thread that you just have to work really hard and try to handle it. As
Mhm.
a physician group, were you like as residents, were you talking about your stresses and ways of managing, or you kind
No,
of stay in your own lane? How did that all work back?
no, like this is 25 years ago,
Yeah.
26 years ago. Um, we weren't talking about wellness at that time at all.
Hmm.
And you say, I wonder if it's changed from my perspective, going through that. And now, I mean, we had no groups that were solely there for physician wellness. Um,
Hmm.
we were just told to get it done. And
Mm.
so, no, we didn't talk to each other about that. We just did it. It was expected. The Mayo Clinic had some perks that we don't have up here. So, they did do things that we didn't do here to try to help us with the hours and things, which was kind of a fun experience. But no, we just drove through it and studied, and our leaders, our attendings or whatever, they were there for us. So I think that was good, and our resident programs were there for us. So they did have things like that built in at the time, but we didn't talk about, oh, I'm tired, what should I do?
Hmm.
I remember the first week I was there, it's given that I'm getting over laryngitis. I had terrible laryngitis. So I sort of croaked on the phone. We had the actual phones then to my mom, and it's like, what do I do? I have to go to work like this. And that's just the example. I went to work in the ER. I couldn't even say a word, but I still was there.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so you just kind of pushed through, I think, then with things, and didn't want to take your beloved day off because you couldn't talk. I mean, it would be a huge sacrifice to take your, one out of your 5 holiday days to because you were sick. So you just wouldn't do that. You'd go in.
And interesting, isn't it? Did you then work as a neurologist in the States?
No, I left. So I left there after my first year of training. I came back to Canada, got into general medicine, and had the opportunity about a year in to switch back into neurology. But I had liked internal medicine at that time and didn't want to keep adding years and years. On retrospect, the years don't really matter. Once you're 56, like myself, I'm like adding 1 year to go back into neuro would have been no big deal. But at the time, it seemed like a massive deal. Oh, an extra year of training. Because I do like neurology. But no, I really love general medicine. It was fun. And as I said, it wasn't really the medicine that now in my career is the interesting thing to me. To be honest, I find medicine kind of routine. It's the people that make it really thrilling. They're so different and how they approach things. And so I think any specialty that I had gone in, I would have loved those people. And I really think on retrospect, I would have found this way somehow, to carve something out for myself that I get in front of those people. And that's what I'm doing most of my day. If I had the same bravery that I had to step out of the box, because as physicians, I think we have to give ourselves permission to have that bravery and vulnerability to be different and to say, hey, it's okay if I'm going to step back from clinical. I got a lot of flack for that. I mean, a lot. Oh, you're going to not work full time. You're not doing so many weeks. And what are you doing? Like eye roll. And I had to really say, no, this is worthy. This is worthwhile. I think it's important and I love it. And now, before I'd hide behind, the chair and say, I'm doing it. Now I'm like, this is important. But I think it takes some time in your career to get to the point where I'm comfortable with that. And a lot of people early in their career say, I just don't have that power to be able to say that. I'm worried I'm going to lose my job and my livelihood, and I don't have my house paid off yet. I mean, you have your house paid off. You can feel relaxed. And so I highly recognize that to be brave and vulnerable sometimes does take some time when you've got your feet in the ground and really feel safe to do it. But whatever, I go on these things because whatever people can do early in career to get that bravery and start to have open conversations that are neutral and kind and not sort of focused on what someone else is doing wrong, but what we need and what we can do and really proactive. I think we get there, you'll get there.
What was it about the full-time clinical experience that wasn't for you, that wasn't going well, that you weren't enjoying?
Well, I love teaching. So again, people. So my thing in my first 15 years of this career was teaching. I won lots of awards. I loved the students and they were so keen. But I have MS. And so in internal medicine, you'd be working 72 hours without sleep. So when I was inpatient clinical, that was my really sole practice. So you come at 7 a.m., 6 a.m., sometimes 5 a.m. if I was on call the night before, work all day. If you're on call that night, we'd be on call 3 times a week. You come work all day, you're on call that night as well. I'd be up all night, come home at 4 a.m., get up at 6 a.m., go back to work till 10 p.m., get up till 7. And my symptoms were pretty significant. I would be dictating. I would notice that I couldn't format my words. My legs were numb. I'd have trouble with my walking. And I thought, what am I doing to myself? And at that time, there was not a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion, especially with invisible disability, which I have. Like if you met me, you wouldn't know I have MS.
Yeah.
And some people, I'd be in a meeting and say, I'm struggling there. I remember someone clearly, well, I don't know why you're struggling. None of us are struggling. I'm like, well, you don't ask. And so, I would never give them that. I wouldn't say, hey, I have MS. What would it look like for me to do something different so that I can actually do this job? On retrospect, I think, wow, what if I had some of those conversations, but instead I didn't have them. And I trained for a new specialty. So, I loved chronic illness care, palliative care, had a lot of the things that I needed. They don't have that same uh, nighttime, high volume work where you're up all night. And I
Mhm.
thought, I think I can do that. And with my
Mhm.
MS, and I did it. And it's part of my journey where I think, what would it have been like if I had those open conversations and given the people around me the chance? And I don't know in that day and age whether anyone would have offered to modify my workflow because of my limitations. But it would be nice now if I'd known I had tried, I would have known the outcome, because I did love the people I worked with. It was a
Mhm.
great environment. I mean, it was a really special team that I was a part of at that time. And it was hard to leave, especially without them really knowing the story. I'm quite introverted. I wouldn't go and talk to everyone about it. I just kind of changed my career path without a lot of conversations.
Yeah. And that's I wonder, so you, one of it, you were saying introvert, that's part of you not wanting to say. And were they curious? Did they ask a little more on, like, was there an exit interview kind of process? Or when you said I can't do this pace, was there anything other than why not?
I kept getting told I wasn't doing enough.
Wow.
You're not doing enough outside of medicine. You need to do more committees. I had 3 kids under 3. I had a husband who was a surgeon, like working 120 hours a week. He was not home, no family in town, had these 3 little kids to take care of. And they're like, you got to do something else. You got to do some more committees. You got to contribute in another way. And I kept saying, but I'm like a 22 award-winning teacher over my what more can I do? Isn't that cool? And they're like, yeah, whatever, find something else. And so, and these are great people, but I think it's the mentality that we have that it's just never enough.
Mm,
And so I don't know, I haven't even, and I should actually sit in front of them because I know all these people now. They're friends of mine. They're great people. I don't think there was any malintent, but we still don't do exit interviews. So when I was the medical director at the hospital in Edmonton during the pandemic, a bunch of people left. And I'm like, we need to do exit interviews. Don't you want to know why they're leaving? Isn't that important? Shouldn't we get a survey? I even actually created an exit interview survey and there was no uptake, no desire to do it.
mm,
So I'm like, no, nobody talked to me. Nobody really said, hey. In fact, when I went to do my palliative care, after I did that, I did come back to medicine for a couple, probably about 3 years. And a lot of people said to me, oh, I thought you weren't going to come back. But nobody sort of said, what? Tell me about it. I really
mm,
promote people asking what, how, and tell me about questions so that you can learn about each other. And because they might have said, "Oh, really? Like, what can you carve out within our world? Maybe you can carve something out. Like, wouldn't that have been cool?"
mm,
But no, nobody asked and just sort of disappeared. And other people disappeared too. And we had people leave during the pandemic, and some people close to them might have known, but I knew them quite well and still didn't totally know why they left. Like I know a few stories, but it leaves a bit of a hole in how you feel connected when you don't know people's stories.
mm, totally. I'm fascinated by this award-winning teacher, 3 under 3, a full-time working partner in medicine as well. And who is saying do more? Like, was that a expectation of the faculty? Was it a email to yourself personally? Like, who's saying not enough?
It's, these periodic reviews they have. I still remember one of them I had, and the leader at the time said to me, "You have to find a niche." And I'm like, "But I love being general internist and a teacher. Like, that's not okay. That's not enough." And, we're struggling now to find clinical people.
Mm,
People that love just medicine. And that was me. I loved medicine. I wanted to go in and take care of the patients and sit in front of the students and listen to them and teach them. And we need those people so badly now. But that review was like, you must find something within general medicine that's your thing. And I was like, boo. I always do this now when so I'm sad. I'm like, oh, I felt bad. Like it made me feel like I wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And, I did get this niche of chronic illness care. It didn't make me a better doctor. It gave me a niche. People would
Yeah.
know, oh, you can go to Brisbois for this. This is her thing.
Yeah.
But why couldn't have teaching been that? I was a really good teacher. I
Mm-hmm.
loved it. I still have students come up to me from years ago and say, well, it really made a difference when I was on that team. And I missed that. So I think the system did lose something by acting in that way and saying you have to find something else. Why can't we embrace what people love and grow that? And look, I didn't get promoted when I applied for promotion once, and I was so mad at the time.
Mm.
It actually was one of the best things that ever happened to me because I did try a whole bunch of other things. And actually, that's great. So, to those people's defense that told me to try to find something else, I have learned so much about myself and in my career by trying to strive to their perfection. So I did a whole bunch of research. I tried leadership. I worked for the college. I worked for the College of Physicians and Surgeons. I worked for the Royal College. I was on exam committees. Like I did all this cool stuff. I met all these cool people. And so I think that my career has grew so much from those people pushing me,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't do those things anymore because it's not my passion.
Mm-hmm.
But I did learn that I don't love those things. I always say to my kids, they're all in their 20s and they're like not 100, a couple of them aren't 100% sure what they want to do. And I'm like, so you do something for a year and you don't like it. Wow, that's such a cool revelation. So, people pushing you, I think, is good too. You try some things. If you haven't tried a bunch of things, you don't know if you don't like it. And
Mm.
many of us in our career, you have to do some stuff you don't like. There's just no way around it. You can't have a career at every stage you're going to love every piece. So as I do every piece, do the pieces you have to do and think, what about this do I love or not love? When I go on in my career, is this something I'm going to keep and hold heart to my heart? Or is this something I'm like, yeah, let it fly away, learn from it. I know I don't like writing papers. I love coming up with the ideas. I love the ideas. I love innovation, quality improvement. But writing the paper, it's like the biggest chore for me. I'm like, oh, someone else do it. So you learn a lot about yourself. So, I'm not angry at any of those
Mm-hmm.
interactions. I'm blessed for those interactions, and I never would blame anyone for what they said. We say those things because we're told we have to. Like we have to, as leaders, we're told we got to get the people we're leading to think about what they want to do and where do you want to contribute. And that's all they were doing. But I also put pressure on myself. We do that to ourselves. Someone tells me find a niche, and I'm like, I'm not good enough because that's our natural response. I could have said, interesting. What about a niche would be interesting?
Mm.
you know and if I didn't find something, what about teaching was interesting? I could have gone to someone and say, well, I could have, I have the confidence to know it's teaching, maybe. And some people did, maybe it's leadership in teaching, maybe it's something else in teach. So if I had really used them to ask more questions, I might have been able to develop that a little more. But instead I got sad, I felt bad about myself, and I just, I got to do everything because
Mm.
I couldn't focus. I didn't know how to find my focus. And one of the things I do with this physician advisor work is if people are lost or struggling, they can come and say, you know, how do I find my way? And
Mm.
that's what coaching does is, doing coaching. You can sit in front of people and ask those good questions so they can figure it out for themselves. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have a mentor. I think those things, we're smart. If someone asks you the right questions, you can find your way through those things and not, be angry at someone that you didn't get promoted, or be angry that they told you to find a niche or whatever it is. You can ask the right questions. You're like, oh, what is it that I want? Like they're pushing me. Interesting. I'm not going to be mad at them for pushing me and be like, that's interesting. Maybe I can grow here, maybe I can grow there. There was a lot of focus on promotion, which I didn't really care about. And I hence got promoted. And I'm very proud of it because I think I'm proud of it because I tried all these really hard things. And I found out those weren't the things I wanted to do. So I always say now, push yourselves, ask yourselves some questions. And if you can't figure out what they are, find someone who can sit there with you in a moment of peace, because we have so little of those moments. And you talk about this with the charting stuff. Make your moments effective so that you can take an hour at some point and really think the good questions, so that you can come out of that hour with some sort of cool thing that you can try.
Mm-hmm. I'm fascinated that those committees cost you in terms of time and it's not necessarily reimbursed work. And you've got little children and you've got a partner who's working. How do you manage to add on top of clinical these other roles? What were some of the things that you did to make that possible for you?
The first when you said that, I'm like, regret, regret, regret. You, you give something up.
Okay.
And I have lots of people ask me that. I've been doing some group coaching and things, and they're like, how do you fit more in? And
Mm.
you can't. Like, there's 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And this idea that we can take on a new committee because we want to say yes, or it's hard to say no, and our lives will be the same, is just like, how do you do that? And my kids still say that we were both absentee parents, and I worked part-time. Like, I worked clinical part-time, like half-time, probably a week to 2 weeks a month. And then the other weeks I would be at home with the kids and do other stuff. But you're still not there. I mean, my mind was elsewhere. I was feeling challenged. We take our work home, we do our charting at night. I put the kids to bed and then I'd work all night.
Mm.
I didn't take care of myself. I didn't exercise. We had a nanny, they'd cook for me, but it wasn't healthy food. Like, it was just totally different than how I care for myself now, and my kids are independent. So I say I sacrificed. I sacrificed my health. I sacrificed my mental health, sacrificed relationships. And when I look back on it, and when the first words that came out of my mouth were regret, I don't know if I would have made the same decisions just to be promoted or to appease someone else's need to mold me into something different.
Mm.
I think I'd tell myself, really think about the things you pick. And I've disappointed some people in the last probably 5 years, and I feel bad about it. But I have taken on things, and then to me, they're not going to work, or it doesn't fulfill a piece of what I want to do. And I realize that. And so I leave it. And as a high achiever, that's very hard to do. And so I'm proud of myself for doing it, but I apologize a lot. And I explain a lot to people. This is why I left that role.
Mm.
And I teach people working through wellness wheels. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but you put all these little pie pieces of the things that are important in your life, and you kind of fill them in what each role does for you. So, one of them, sense of community, or financial, or being involved in innovation, or successors. You put different things in there that matter, family time, and you put the different pieces in, and how much does this fill? And I'd put it in and I'd realize, well, my clinical work is the financial piece in this one area, but I'm not enjoying that clinical piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I would get out of that clinical piece and do a different one. But that's hard, because then someone else has to do it. And so there's a lot of guilt. I think as we find our own way, it's how do we get over the guilt of having somebody else then doing it. And I had that with call. So I couldn't do that medicine anymore because of my MS. And even through the pandemic, one of my sons was really ill. And I stepped out of clinical work. I was the medical director at this hospital. I couldn't do it all. And I say to people, I'm the proudest of that, proudest of anything I've ever done. And people still will say, well, you were unreliable. I've heard that.
Mm.
And I'm like, that's devastating to say. I hear someone say that, but good for me. Like, my son was sick and he was my
Mm.
priority, and he's better now. And I did what I need to do as a mom and as a person. I personally was depressed and struggling as a parent, watching your kid depressed and struggling. And we must take care of ourselves and be proud of ourselves. And I say to the residents a lot, you can't fix the system problems. I can't fix the fact that we didn't have enough of the doctors to cover. We have to be able to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Man, that's hard, right? When someone says, "Oh, you're unreliable." Oh, it's so sad. It hurt, breaks my heart, but I know in my heart why I did it. And I try to tell people I'm very open about my struggles. I do these podcasts specifically so people can hear, hey, we're not alone, and be
Mm.
proud of yourself that you go through adversity and then you're going to get through it. But find, supports that you need and realize that you will get through it. And we want to make sure physicians get through things safely and feel proud of themselves for stepping out rather than feeling, so guilty about it.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
top topic there probably, but I'm passionate about that piece.
Well, yeah, I think that disappointing people is important to acknowledge that you feel like you disappointed people and that you knew somebody else would have to step into that role if you left it. And you knew it wasn't the right thing for you. You're not present anyway. If you stay in that role, you don't have the time to give that role, or it's creating a negative or risk on something else happening in your life, like your child and their well-being and you and your well-being is at risk if you keep not disappointing people on the other end. And
Yeah.
you have to decide who's going to be disappointed, you and your kid or the people who are in the workplace. Like, I can see the difficulty in navigating that. And you do this when you've got these roles and you're like, do I have the ability to say yes to this wholeheartedly, or
Yeah.
at least with enough of me present or not?
Yeah. And how do you have those open conversations so that you can say to people, what would it look like if I cared for my mental health? I want to be there for this team. How can it look? How do I do this the best for you? How do you, get this done? How do we support you as well? How do we advocate? If we have gaps, what do we do as a team? I want to be there for the team. And how are we okay having those open conversations without judgment? And that's the thing. I think we need to all rally together to not judge the other person. We have positive intent. It's very rare that a physician won't, or any health provider doesn't have positive intent. We just get caught into this, that other person is doing something bad. Think about who they are and what they're going through, and ask those kind of what, how, tell me about what's going on questions. And it's amazing when it happens. It just draws people together and you feel bonded, and you may not cover, but you'll find a solution. You'll talk about how you manage it. And, sometimes you're not covered. And then you talk to your colleagues who would rely on you. How do we get to support you? And it shuttles down, and even the system players start to see, because we're organized and we talk to each other, and then they can see that we need support. So, one of the things I learned as being a mediator is there's a process to working through things that really works. And instead of just being like, I don't like the way this is handled and walking away, like, come in and talk to me. And that's one thing that I'm really trying to do. If you don't like what it looks like, I want to talk to you about it. Like, I'm okay to do that. I'm okay to be vulnerable. I'm okay to hear the opposite. If you think the opposite of me, bring it on. I'll learn something. I'll know something better at the end of the day by your opinion. And how do we work as teams to not blame ourselves for the system inefficiencies and all the admin burden stuff that we're talking about? It's not our fault that we're being asked to do these things, but how do we do it better? How do we draw in AI? Like, there's cool things going on. So yeah, but it takes a lot of reflection, and not everyone's a reflector. I talk to a lot of physicians. A lot of physicians are doers. We like to action and get things done. And stopping to reflect, it takes a lot of work, and it's draining. And if you're not a natural reflector, which is totally cool, but then it puts you in a different space because you have to figure out in your own way. And so we all each have to kind of figure out. I'm a natural kind of reflect on who I am and that kind of thing, but that is way out of comfort zone for a lot of people, and they still have to figure it out. So if you're a doer, you still got to figure out what you do with your 24 hours in the day, and you still have to figure out your health, and your body is still there, and your mind is still there, and your joy is still there, and the people around you, if you're lucky enough to have some, because not everyone does, they're still there, but if you do it wrong, sometimes they don't stay, right? And so it's
Yeah.
how do we keep our pod healthy?
Yeah. So tell us about this, the conflict work that you kind of built this understanding and need for the conflict understanding and negotiation, getting better at conflict and mediation. Tell us about how that came about and what that looked like.
Well, I was in the medical director role and there was a lot of conflict. And I remember one night I was helping this one physician and I pulled into my garage from a long clinical day late. It's probably 7 o'clock. Got a kind of panic call from this doc. And I sat in the garage in my car for at least 2 hours listening. And I
Mm.
thought, man, I'm a good listener. Like I'm going above and beyond. I didn't eat dinner. It's 9 o'clock. And my spouse kept looking in. Are you coming in? And I'm like, no, I'm working. I'm working. And this person totally dislikes me still. They ended up leaving the province. I liked them very much. But they thought I did a terrible job. And I was like, oh, I worked so hard for them. I worked so hard.
Mm-hmm.
What I recognized was that I wasn't getting outcome.
Right.
And so that's why I went and did this mediation training, because we need to be able to work through problems and get outcomes and not just talk about it. We need an outcome. We need to know that may not be the outcome that we imagined or hope for, but we need to know, what is the outcome? How did that come about? What is the follow-up? How am I going to know it works? Where does it go from here? And in a lot of our systems, we don't have good process for that. Now when I was talking about change at the beginning, a lot of people are working towards change in that and trying to help people as they struggle in their careers find their way with process. But we are at the very early stages of making sure those processes work and following up. So when I did the mediation training to get better, as like lots of doctors, I blame myself. Oh, I need more training. I need to be a better leader. I need to do a master's in leadership. So I went and did that, and I need to do this. Look, we don't all have to do every piece of training. You don't have to be a mediator, but we do need to know we can reach out to find someone who does know that stuff. Find someone who does know something about leadership in the gap that you think you might have. Learn from each other. So I filled in some of those gaps that way. And I learned there's a process. And once I saw that there is the process to get outcomes, that we can empower ourselves, like in any situation, one-on-one, in your group, in your meetings, whatever it is, to create lasting change. This physician advisor role with the Medical Staff Association in Edmonton came right about when I finished the mediation training. And I was like, wow, I could apply this and see if people need it, because it was a brand new role, because the bylaws say physicians need to have someone there to go to, a physician advisor. And so it was an experiment. It was a pilot for them. And what I found was, sitting in front of physicians, process works. And I have someone that was about to quit because of a one-on-one conflict.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I worked through the process like a mediator would, bringing it way early into a situation and say, what are the issues? What solvable issues? What do you care about? What do you think they care about?
Mm-hmm.
What happened? What are the gaps? What don't you know? And creating this kind of roadmap that we then use to sit in front of the person and have a conversation. And these problems went away. I had people who wanted to quit, and all of a sudden they're like, yeah, it just isn't a big deal anymore.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're not going to agree on everything, but we hashed it out. I'd have meetings with all these high level leaders there that were supposed to be, an hour of confrontation, and we'd send all this stuff ahead of time. And they're like, yeah, I mean, this is nothing. We're 10 minutes. And they're like, yeah, makes sense. That was a misunderstanding, and things would get solved. So once, it's been 2 years, a bit over 2 years now, that role, and it's just expanded to Calgary, North Zone and Central Zone. And I'm like, wow, we can actually hugely impact our own lives by managing things in a process way. We can't control everyone around us. So people will say, well, what if there's one person that never is going to listen, and I go through the process and it doesn't change? I'm like, you can't change everybody. You can't change everything, but you can know you did something with process, and then you can make a really good decision. So you can decide, do you want to be there? Do you not want to be there? What pieces of this are you okay with? What pieces aren't you okay with? And you make a really good decision for yourself, and they will understand what it was that brought you to that decision. Just like when I left my job, they would know exactly why I left.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like, I wonder what happened. I would have sat with them and said, these are the things. And if it came to the point they couldn't fulfill, any change in that 72-hour being awake, I'd say, well, I love you guys, but I have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would have been a bonding moment. It wouldn't have been why did she leave? It would have been, she loves us, but she has to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I try to bring to physicians so that they can really work through things. And it works. And I love sitting with my colleagues. We have so many amazing people doing this job. And I just want to help people feel they can stay in this work. And if they don't want to stay, that they really know they made the decision in a processed way, because it takes a lot of time to train to be a physician, as we all know, or
Yeah.
any health. If you're another health professional listening to this, all of our training is extensive.
Yeah. How can you give us an example of how this process might have worked within a complex situation? Is there an example that you can show us, kind of the before and after, how that process kind of came about?
Well, I have team examples and I have individual examples because I work with both. Um, I sort of gave you an individual example. I had a leader, so a lot of leaders come to me.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, look, something's happening and I have no impact. What do I do? And so I had a team come to me. They were a team of about 10. And the hospital was moving their patients to a different ward. And they didn't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they just sort of heard through the grapevine and they were panicking. They're just like, this can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't really know, how do we organize ourselves to present what we want? How do we know what we want? How do we figure this out? Because what often happens is the team will be like, this can't happen. And we stomp our feet and we get angry. And how dare you make these proposals?
Mm-hmm.
And we call these in mediation and in coaching positional statements. You can't do that. So there's no dialogue. You can't do that. Our patients aren't going to do well there. You have to change well, no one's going to respond to that. What do you mean I have to respond? I have to change mine. What do you mean I can't do that? Yes, I can. I'm the administrative leader. I can do whatever I want. So, so I sat down with this team and they were amazing. They all sat down and gave up a bunch of hours. We sat down and we worked through this roadmap and say, okay, hey, what are the issues here?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about that space that your patients aren't going to do well in? Like, not just my patients aren't going to do well. What is it? Okay, well, we feel we're too far from this. Or, the physicians of this team want to have access to this piece, or this interdisciplinary team is needed. And that space is, 500 meters from that interdisciplinary team, or whatever it was. So we took this big bucket of a problem and we dissected it into issues.
Mm-hmm.
Each of those issues, you'd say, oh, I can fix that. Or I can figure that out. Or you're too far away. Okay, well, what would it look like then if you needed those people?
Mm-hmm.
We went through that, and we went through what the stakeholders might want and why operations might want to move them, like all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up with this roadmap, and they went to the leaders and had a conversation together. And they said, we've sat down together. We put in, 8 hours of time. We've created this thing where we want to present to you. We want to hear your perspectives. Like, we've guessed at your perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us if we're wrong. And they were wrong with some of them, but at least the other people realized they were thinking about them,
Mm-hmm.
which is, and they didn't get moved.
Okay.
And you know what? Maybe they would have gotten moved and their things would have been considered. That would have been just as good. Sorry. But they were happy they didn't get moved. So that was a success story.
Yeah, and I think success could have gone either way, that the patients did get moved, but at least the concerns of the physicians were brought forward about why this might not go as well as, or have you considered these aspects of it? I agree that the workers on the ground have that perspective that maybe administration hasn't seen. And I see a lot of physicians come forward and say they just don't understand what it's like to be me. We even get physicians who say, leadership's never come down and looked at what we do. They don't know how we work in this space. They don't see the things that we have to do to be able to live within the decisions that are made above us. And they're good at the problem solving, but there comes a point where they're just either exhausted or mad or cranky and they're at that conflict level. So yeah, I totally understand now the pulling you back away from the situation, having a discussion about why is this upsetting you? What is going on? What do you think they're thinking about? What are you thinking about? Who do you need to go talk to in order to at least present your ideas to, and who should you present them to, and in a way that might be at least accepted or listened to without mediation.
Yeah. And we miss a step. So as physicians, we miss a step. We think about the big problem and we brainstorm, but we miss the step of teasing out the interests. So mediation calls it interest. What matters to the stakeholders, including you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. What matters to the stakeholders? Because I hear a lot of physicians go up to their leadership and say, here's a really good idea. I've been thinking about it and this could really work. And then they get kind of shut down. And so there may have just been a leadership who didn't want to listen, but it could have also been a leadership that said, we didn't even consider the stakeholder piece of this, which is why we couldn't say yes to you, whatever that looks like.
Exactly. Yeah. Once you present it, then they're like, oh, well, that's what matters to you. You got it wrong. What matters to us? We want to tell you this. And what do? You start a dialogue.
Yeah.
And that's what creates change.
Yeah, you guys do this with your patients all the time. And we know that developing trust with your patients includes things like what matters to them. So when we understand why the patient might want to take this medication because it matters to them, because they are the ones who want to go and do this thing and they can't do it because of their medical condition. But if we propose this method of treatment, then they can go and do the thing they're interested in. Then we get uptake, right, of the information. So we do this on the daily with our peeps, right, with our patients that we're looking after. And you are great problem solvers. You problem solve all the time. And what I love about this conversation is you can create some system awareness or change locally if we have that skill of knowing what matters to me, what matters to my patients, what matters to this service that we're offering, what matters to the leadership team. Why would leadership be making these decisions? What would be mattering to them? Maybe we need to go and ask them first. Just say, hey, tell us why you're moving these patients. And then, then we can get their perspective and then we can even start our conversations. It might just be we need to put our agenda down for a minute and say, why are you doing that? Just if you can give me some perspective on what matters to you about that, just so we can be able to come back with some ideas. So it's interesting. I think this ability to understand why mediation, why these skills, why conflict resolution can happen so quickly. It's because we are great problem solvers as physicians. So when we understand the pieces of the jigsaw that need to be put together.
And, sorry, I'm going into spasm here with this coughing, but, it brings us back to coaching and why I went into coaching in the first place for my patients. And as you said, it's about the patients. When you ask the right questions, it works.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's asking the right question, what matters to you, and I find so much joy. I also did the coaching piece initially, one for myself to be able to get the change I wanted in my day. And secondly, for the ability to say to my patients, hey, you're in this job, you're in this financial position, you have this health condition, what do you want to achieve? And how can I help? And that ability to do that with a patient was phenomenally exciting because it was beyond listening. It was beyond that empathy suck. And it was into the fixing, but not me fixing. It was, how can I help you do the fixing for you? What do you want? And how do we help you get there? And then we just simply do the same thing for ourselves within our lives, within our jobs. We say, what do you want? What is going on? What is the circumstances? Who are the stakeholders here? Like, how many kids do you have? How old are they? What does your partner do? And then what do you want? And so when your boss says to you, you need to do more, you can say, no, I'm doing a full-time job at home, a full-time job with my physical health, and a full-time job at work. I don't think I need to add anything yet. Thank you.
Well, and I
Thanks
say
for
to
the
people,
offer.
learn how to say, repeat back to them, I need to do more. What does that look like? Help
Yeah.
me understand.
Mm,
Tell me what it looks like to do more. Can I sit down and show you my week?
mm,
What can I get rid of?
mm,
What do I need to add? What
mm.
doesn't work for you when you see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'm really asking those what, how, tell me. Oh, that's interesting. I need to do more. I need to do more. And when people hear it back, I always say I'll tell the residents are like, they say, I'm not doing a good job. I'll be like, I'm not doing a good job. Tell me more about that.
Mhm.
Because what happens is we get into this vortex of being upset
Yeah.
and assumptions, and then we create this self-narrative. So I'm not doing a good job. So what does it look like to do a good job?
Mm,
Because I want to be that person. So you put it on about yourself, not about what they're saying about. In coaching, we call it appreciative inquiry.
mm,
What about it is not a good job? I want to hear that. Tell me about that.
mhm.
Embrace it. Like, cool, I'm not doing a good job. Instead of being upset, I'm like, that hurts. I'm going to tell you it hurts.
Yeah.
I'm hurt because my goal is to do a good job.
Yeah.
So, immediately on saying that, I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to think, oh gosh, that hurts. And that's where
Yeah.
I come up with that little eye tear. Oh, that
Yeah.
hurts.
Yeah.
I want to hear you tell me what it takes to do a good job because I want to be that person. I'm here with you. And I need to know more because just telling me I'm not doing a good job is not good enough because that doesn't help me grow.
Well, it doesn't tell you even where to put the emphasis. Like, do I put the emphasis on, is it I'm not seeing enough patients? Is it I'm not doing work in a timely fashion? Is it that I'm not going to all the meetings? Is it that I'm just 5 minutes late to the meetings? Like, when we actually understand what they mean by that statement, because you could just completely create a disaster for yourself in terms of the amount of time you're spending at work. And it's not at all acknowledged because what they were looking for was your timeliness to turn up to something or
Right.
your
You have no idea what they wanted because
no
the
idea where to
initial
put your focus.
reaction, many of us turn away and walk away and
Yeah.
go home and just, I say we have to go through the rant. Well, that makes me mad. They said I didn't do a good job. Well, do that at home or write it down, whatever you need to do. Get over that initial shock or whatever it is they said you weren't doing a good job. And then just sit down there and say, well, what do they mean? And
Mhm.
I did this with one of my leaders. They're like, you're not doing your job. And I was like, I don't get it. And at the time I was so shocked. I couldn't come up with any of these great questions. But then I went home and I thought, what does that look like? And at the end of the day, they couldn't answer my questions.
Mhm.
They didn't know.
They didn't know what it meant.
No, and that told me a lot, didn't it?
Yeah, it
Why
did.
did they, what was it then that created them to say that?
Yeah, yeah,
And so then you sort of decide, is that someplace where I can grow or isn't it someplace I
yeah,
can grow?
yeah,
I want to be someplace where they can say to me, oh, shoot, I can't actually tell you. I better go find out because I heard it somewhere. So I'm just repeating it.
yeah.
Is that good enough? Like maybe that's not good enough. Maybe when I hear it, I need to ask, well, what do you mean she's not doing a good job? So
Mm.
that they can come to me with something really solid. And so I think as we start to ask the good questions, then it goes back to the next person because they can't answer it. And then they think, oh, shoot, maybe I could have asked a different question. And then they go to the person they heard it through in the back hall and they
Mhm.
ask a better question. Because, I'll say to residents, because they'll be like, there's a power differential, I can't talk. And I'm like, look, if you stick, number one, use my name in vain. Say, if I talked to Dr. Brisbois, we had a workshop or something, and hey, I'm trying something. Just bear
Yeah,
with me. I'm trying something.
yeah,
I'm trying some investigation. I want to do better. Put it upon, hey, I want to do better. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to be part of this team. I want to do what you need me to do. So what does that look like? How do you get in trouble for that?
yeah.
Even if somebody's mad at you, how can you get a negative evaluation if someone says, how can I do better? And I love the little sentences like, what's happening? Like, I'm worried.
Mm.
Or there's this CUS principle. It's concern, uncomfortable, stop, and safety. I'm concerned. Ooh, like I'm uncomfortable now. I use a lot of those. I'm like, I do this with my hands, this little, what's happening? So I'll sit there And even my patients are like, what is she doing? My residents, they just laughing like, ooh.
Mm.
Even when they're mad, I'm like, that's interesting. And they're like, what are you doing? And they start laughing. Even if they're angry, I'm like, I want to know about this.
Mm. It's
And you
the lean
slow
in
down. You're like, I
moment,
want to know.
that I'm invested in figuring this out moment.
And they
That,
love it. They love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's great detective skill work. It's that curiosity that we love, that patient connection, the human connection, the connection with our peers, the lean in to say, tell me about you. What do I need to know to be able to help? It's that we already know that connection is such a massive piece of that being able to create wellness, right? Is the connection with others, to be heard. And even when you were talking earlier about the equity and inclusion, the saying, 72 hours a week is really bad for my health, people. Like, I really need to call this and say no for my own human physiology. Thank you. Like having somebody wanting to know that about you is such a different experience than having to say, listen, I need to tell you something, to somebody wanting to hear that, stopping and pausing.
If a leader had come in and done this and said, Amanda,
Yeah, I'm curious.
I need to know more about what you're going through.
Mm.
I want to be here for you. No judgment,
Mm-hmm.
confidentially. What's your life like?
Yeah,
I probably would have started bawling, to be honest,
totally.
because I'd be like, oh my God, someone cares.
Somebody cares.
And that doesn't mean nobody cared. It just means the right question maybe wasn't on the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
And what does it look like for you? And what does medicine mean to you?
Mm.
And what do you like about GIM? What don't you like about it? How do we help you make the stuff you don't like manageable? Because I might
Yeah.
not be able to take them away,
Yes.
but what could I do to make it manageable for you? Because it could have been manageable. I probably could have done nights in a manageable way if I wasn't doing 3 in a row. Like we
Yeah.
eventually changed the system and these sort of things, but
Yeah.
I could have done a night that was manageable.
Yeah.
But it means not being up for 72 hours. It's like, what does it look like? So, it's interesting. I think it would have helped them and helped the system too. So you ask each of those 25 members of the team,
Yeah.
what does it mean to you? What would it look like to you to make that
Yeah.
manageable? And so that's interest. That's what matters to each person is their interests. Well, I have a sick mom at home, so I have to be home at 5.
Mm.
It wasn't me, but it might be someone.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, integrate those? And that's why mediation is successful, is because people's interests so they can come to a conclusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know those interests, you can't figure it out as well. And we do come to conclusions, but we make them up. And that's why sometimes they don't work.
Mm.
So then you need follow up. If we're making it up and we don't know everyone's interest, you definitely have to follow it up and get input to follow up. Because sometimes when I'm working with people, they just can't get around figuring out people's interests. They don't want to do it. It's so unnatural. So they'll come up with solutions. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, we didn't figure out what everyone needs. But as long as you're following up and you can hear the problems as they come along, you'll get through it. Might not be as effective, but you will get through it. But if you just do something and then that's it, we're doing this, and you never follow up, which happens a lot,
Yes.
what do you learn?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And you
that,
don't know why it might have failed either.
right,
So yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
How
Who
do
cares?
people contact you if they're looking to connect and take advantage of some of the things that you offer?
So in the Calgary North and Central zones, my position starting August 1st. And through the Edmonton zone, it goes through the Edmonton Zone Medical Staff Association website. So you can connect there. It'll say physician advisor if you're a physician looking for me. If you're looking for me and you're a healthcare provider, I have a website. So it's Amanda Brisbois, MD.com. And I've got some stuff on there. I've got some articles about this stuff, about the process to solve problems and how to take a breath when you're talking to people. And there's a little link there. If you ever want to talk to me, no cost, click 15 minutes. We can just say, hey, even if you're in a system and you don't know who in that, you don't want to talk to me, you want to talk to someone in your system. I work very hard to connect people within their system where they can get help within like their leader or whatever it is. So this is not about me. This is about you. So if you just ever want to connect, AmandaBrisboisMD.com. You can message me there. You can get me through the MSAs. Or if you just want to chat with someone who's gone on a different journey, I'm always open to that. I love mentoring and just helping doctors have a good life. That's that's my why these days.
Love it. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think it gives people a bit of hope that they can start to look at conflict slightly with a pause and an ability to have maybe another look at it from a different angle, perspective, and with help. So thank you.
You're so welcome. I do workshops and I have people write words that associate with conflict before the workshop and do a word cloud. They're all like distress, time, blah, blah, blah. And after, and they're like hope, some opportunity. Like there is opportunity when we hit the wall in life. Just got to figure it out. We got to be curious.
Love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. You're doing great work. I love it that you're getting to hear different perspectives about what people are going through and how we can kind of fine tune our own lives. And I think these kind of connections can really help us get that whatever we're doing is good. It's okay.
Yeah, we can make it our way. Yeah.
And thanks for having me. I'm very grateful for that. And I love it that you're in Edson. We're neighbors and we didn't even know it. So that's
right. So fun.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.